it's crazy to send spouses and children to South Korea given the provocation of North Korea.
News of a senior UN official making a rare visit to North Korea. The UN's political affairs chief is heading to the reclusive country for a 4-day trip to discuss what the organization describes as issues of mutual interest and concern. Jeffrey Feltman will meet with high-ranking North Korean officials when he heads to Pyongyang, including the country's foreign minister, Lee Yong-ho.
I'm not going to go into any detail, but it will be a wide-ranging policy discussion.
Jeffrey Feltman, who used to work for the U.S. State Department, will meet with North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho and Vice Foreign Minister Park Yong-guk for talks on issues of mutual interest and concern. Although UN officials say the 4-day visit was set up back in September, Feltman's trip is timely as it comes less than a week after North Korea fired its most powerful ICBM to date. South Korea and the U.S. are also holding a massive joint aerial drills over the peninsula during that time.
This all comes as the U.S. and South Korea launch huge joint aerial military drills starting today, going through all this week. Some 230 aircraft involved, including stealth aircraft, as well as 12,000 U.S. service members, both Marine and Navy. They're being deployed from 8 different bases in the region. Now, all of this is annual, pre-planned, but it does come in the wake of last week's launching of an ICBM by North Korea, the longest range, most powerful ever, capable, according to experts that we spoke with, of hitting all of the U.S. mainland with a nuclear payload, potentially.
Feltman will be the first senior UN official to travel to North Korea since the former UN aid chief went in back in 2011.
Feltman's visit comes at a time of increased tension on the Korean peninsula. Last week, North Korea test-fired what it says is a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile that it said could reach the U.S. mainland. And next week, the head of the UN will also be in the region on a 2-day visit to Japan. North Korea is expected to be high on the agenda. Secretary General Antonio Guterres has repeatedly offered to broker a political solution to the ongoing tension. It'll be the UN chief's first visit to Japan after assuming the post. Guterres is expected to meet with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and attend an international conference on healthcare. On North Korea, Guterres has criticized the country's UN Security Council violations and weapons programs. But he has also said he is ready to play a role in easing tensions. Some observers say Guterres could be trying to strengthen cooperation with Japan as the U.S. retreats from a number of global frameworks. Japan is the second largest contributor to the UN budget. Turning back to the North's latest missile launch, the Chinese foreign minister has weighed in. Wang Yi says China is against any behavior that elevates tensions. Wang Yi made the remarks to reporters after a meeting with his Mongolian counterpart. Wang described the latest situation as regrettable, following 2 months of relative calm before the missile launch. Wang said China is opposed to North Korea ignoring UN Security Council resolutions. Wang also apparently warned the U.S. against taking measures outside UN Security Council resolutions. In the past, China and Russia have promoted a plan known as a dual suspension or freeze-for-freeze plan, calling for the North to hold its nuclear and missile programs. In return, the U.S. would stop its military drills with South Korea. The U.S. has previously said it does not believe this plan will work. The South Korean and U.S. militaries are currently running a large-scale area joint drill.
Major joint air drills, which North Korean state media claim, are pushing the region to the brink of nuclear war. The so-called Vigilant Ace, that's what they call it, exercises involving hundreds of aircraft, including a couple of dozen American stealth jets. U.S. officials note these sorts of drills happen every year and are not in response to action by North Korea. But they do come a week after North Korea launched a long-range missile, which the North Koreans claim can strike anywhere in the United States. Though a senior U.S. official tells Fox News the missile broke up when it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere.
Crew members from 2 airlines have reported seeing what they believe was last week's missile test while flying over Japan. Cathay Pacific says one of its crews saw what looked like the missile's re-entry, but the flight was not affected and what they saw was far away from the passenger jet. The plane was on its way to Hong Kong from San Francisco. The Hong Kong-based company says the crew notified Japanese air traffic controllers. It added that it has no plans to change its routes so far. Pilots on 2 separate Korean air flights also said they saw flashes of light, possibly the missile. Those flights were also over Japan, heading toward the primary airport serving Seoul.
This weekend, the president's national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, told Fox News that the potential for war with North Korea is increasing every day. And yesterday, the South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said he'd urge the Pentagon to get military members' families out of that area.
It's crazy to send spouses and children to South Korea given the provocation of North Korea. So I want them to stop sending dependents, and I think it's now time to start moving American dependents out of South Korea.
Nearly 30,000 U.S. troops are stationed in South Korea right now. Gordon Chang is here, foreign affairs journalist and author of the book Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World. Is Senator Graham right? Should dependents be leaving South Korea? That sounds extreme.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit premature. There's a lot of things that we can do to actually disarm North Korea peacefully. So, for instance, much more intensive sanctions, not only on North Korea, but especially on North Korea's backers, China, Russia, some other countries. Once you start evacuating American dependents, you spook a lot of people.
Yeah.
You spook the Chinese, you spook the North Koreans, you can create a situation where the dynamic just goes out of control. So this is a little bit early to talk about this.
These war games, or whatever you want to call them, military exercises, I've been reporting on these at this time of year for as long as I can remember. I mean, why are they using it now? Is it just convenience?
Well, we've got to do this because the North Koreans have...
No, but I mean, why are the North Koreans going, look at this, brink of war?
Well, they're always going to do that because every time the U.S. has a South Korean military drill, they say pretty much the same thing. They may not say nuclear war, but they say war. But the United States and South Korea need to do this because we've got to have our forces prepared for a North Korean invasion. The North Koreans have about 70% of their army forward deployed on the demilitarized zone. So that creates a dynamic where we've got to do things like practice all the time.
Do we have a better idea of the end game? And the reason I ask is, if the reason you want an ICBM that can carry a nuclear warhead is to be a part of the international discussion, then you're probably there. Is North Korea, in your estimation, about to ask for some sit-downs?
Well, it could, let's say, in 9 months, a year or so, when they're really confident in their arsenal. They've got a few things that they've got to do, for instance, the heat shielding, a little bit of guidance. But if they have an electromagnetic pulse device, they don't need to re-enter the atmosphere to kill a lot of Americans. And they've been talking about EMP devices. I think the North Koreans, though, they want to intimidate us because they want us off the peninsula so they can then get South Korea sort of into submission so they can take it over. That's, I think, the real danger here.
So what they want is not talk. What they want is to control the entire Korean peninsula.
That's the ultimate endgame for the Kim regime. That's been ever since 1948 when Kim Il-sung founded the North Korean regime. And that's been their consistent goal. They talk about it all the time. Kim Jong-un himself talks about, quote unquote, final victory these days. That's North Korean code for intimidating the South into submission.
Now, China does not want that.
Probably not, but the other
we don't really know.
We don't really know, and the other thing we do know is that a lot of North Korea's inventory looks like it comes from China. There's a lot of questions that the United States needs to ask, because there's some things we can't confirm. But if indeed a lot of this North Korean equipment does come from China, that changes our conversations with Beijing and the way that we approach Beijing in connection with North Korea, and a lot of other things for that matter.
Before we go, the designation of North Korea as a state sponsor of terror, something that's recently happened with the president after they were off the list for, I don't know, a decade or so.
Right.
Has that helped our cause of peace, or has it hurt it? And if so, why?
Well, the thing about that designation is it is symbolic, but it does bring with it about a handful of sanctions, which were important. Because I think that the way that we settle this peacefully is we just starve the regime of funds in order to build nukes, detonate all sorts of stuff, launch missiles, engage in gift politics, which is Kim Jong-un buying the loyalty of people around him. them. So we need to cut off the money, and that designation helped a little bit. But there's so many other more important things we need to do. That's just a small part of the puzzle.
Japanese draft resolution calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons was adopted at the UN General Assembly, but with less support than last year. In a plenary session, 156 countries voted in favor of the resolution. That number is down by 11 countries compared to last year. This year's draft repeatedly cites the nuclear and missile threats posed by North Korea. It includes fewer references to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The draft resolution also made no mention of another treaty to ban nuclear weapons. Earlier this year, more than 50 countries and territories signed on to that treaty. Nuclear powers are opposed to it. So is Japan, which relies on the American nuclear umbrella for protection. For the past 24 years, Japan has submitted drafts to the General Assembly calling for the abolition of nuclear weapons. They were all approved.